It's the second Saturday in November. It's week number 11 of this college football season, and it's College Football Today live right here on this Saturday on SportsGrid. He is the mastermind of the college football pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is old K-Dubs. That is Kevin Walsh, and I am Ben Stevens. This week, on Tuesday, for the first time this year, and for the first time in the 12-team era of the college football playoff, we got our first unveiling on the CFP rankings. So at this point of the season now, Joe, as we get ready for this second Saturday in November, it feels as though each and every game, each and every Saturday, each and every weekend amps up in the intensity in the final month here of the regular season.
Final stretch run of the season. We see the top two teams in the Big Ten, Oregon and Ohio State. Ohio State gets a victory over Penn State, but now the SEC will take front and center stage. Two marquee games. We have an SEC eliminator in Baton Rouge, Alabama and LSU with two losses, and it's not just those teams, right? It's teams, Kev, fighting for bowl contention. A team like Georgia Tech that has 5 wins on the year, they're facing off against undefeated Miami. How do those games play out a little bit later today?
100%. I will make the point. I will credit Donnie Rightside for bringing it up. He's right, whether you like it or not. The new format has made LSU, Alabama, our game of the week. It flatly is not that in the old format. It's just not.
Correct.
Nobody would think that Bama or LSU would have real chances to make the playoff. It would take minor miracles for either team to get in under that old format. The notion that people keep telling themselves that the regular season mattered more last year versus this year is a lie. It is wrong. I don't know what it is. I can't help you. You're still telling yourself that. You've been wrong the whole time. You're still wrong. Again, LSU Bama means less under your old format. And don't tell me that Georgia Bama or Oregon Ohio State, two of the best games of the last decade, mattered less when they played. And oh, by the way, I know that this is just a preliminary look at what things could look like, but I mean, my goodness. Penn State hosting Notre Dame, Irish plus the points, it's already free. Put it on the card. I mean, the amount of important games that we have added to our college football season, Ben, rankings problems aside that we will get to, the format, I think, has already proven to be the best thing for this sport.
There is no doubt about it. It is now the final month of the regular season. It is now November. If you still hold the idea that each and every marquee matchup in the regular season should act as a de facto playoff game in its own right, well, welcome to Baton Rouge on this Saturday. Welcome to Oxford in the Grove between Ole Miss and Georgia. We never saw a multiple-loss team reach the college football playoff in the 10-year history of the 4-team format. We have multiple-loss teams still playing for a shot at CFP glory in the second Saturday of November. If you ask me, that's a pretty darn good thing. Now let's go to the actual rankings themselves. And as you saw the exercise on Tuesday, it is worth noting that 1 through 25, or perhaps 1 through 12, is not necessarily how the bracket will lay out by the time we get to the opening weekend of December and Selection Sunday. But as you look at the top 12 teams in the country, you saw them right there. Oregon remains number 1. In fact, as compared to the AP top 25 entering week 11, the same 12 teams, Kev, are at the top. The only change, Georgia's number 2 in the AP top 25. They're number 3 in the college football playoff rankings. Ohio State is number 2. As you saw the committee unveil the rankings for the first time in the 12-team era, for the first time in 2024. What was one of your main takeaways first and foremost?
Penn State, without a shadow of a doubt. It's something that I am really upset about, and I know there are people who say, hey, listen, these things are going to play out. Don't worry about it. That's not true. Because what happens now is if Penn State wins out, which they are heavily projected to do, this is what Penn State does. They lose their biggest games. They beat up on everybody else. It'll be very difficult for a BYU or an Indiana or even a Notre Dame or whomever, or Boise State, to jump Penn State, because this is where the committee has them now. Again, I am very happy about expansion. I am still very bothered that we do this exercise. I mean, yes, it's good for us. Here's the thing. We don't need it. We don't struggle to fill our 3 hours. We could give you 6 if you need it. Easy, actually. Let me pull back. Let's not sign ourselves up for nothing crazy. But the college basketball's been doing this much longer, and they have it right. You will get the rankings when it is all said and done. Because now what's going to happen, Joe, is the committee is not going to go off the full body of work. They're going to go off of this week's rankings when they do next week's rankings. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, puts them in a box, and it hurts all of these teams that are behind Penn State that flatly should not be.
Yeah, it's the foundation of how these 12 teams will get there, and that's the unfortunate part. And to Kevin's point, Penn State's in the Big Ten, and a team that's undefeated in the Big Ten in terms of Indiana that's absolutely smashed the competition is sitting there behind a one-loss football team, and that's totally disrespectful. We've talked about it on this desk time and time again that, if you change the name instead of Indiana and replaced it with a Michigan or Ohio State or an Oregon for that matter, they would be much higher than where the Indiana Hoosiers sit right here heading into this game against Michigan. That's the unfortunate part. BYU has a great resume, but they played some close games. Typically the game against Oklahoma State, you could stand out. I mean, Indiana has absolutely smashed everyone and covered numbers, one of the most dominant offense and defensive teams in the Big Ten and all of college football. Give them their respect.
Indiana, in fact, is the best cover team in all of the country. Indiana is 8-1 against the spread. It's why when we use the odds, it is important to remind people that, yes, the schedule has been easy for IU, as we'll dive into later. But the odds makers know that and set it as the expectation. So when you even exceed those odds expectations in the way that Indiana is, it is impressive and noteworthy. As we look at the top 12, 4 Big Ten teams, Oregon number 1, Ohio State, Penn State, in Indiana. 4 SEC teams as well, led by Georgia. You have Texas, Alabama, and Tennessee in the top 12. You've got the independent team in Notre Dame. And then 1 team from the ACC, it's undefeated Miami. 1 team from the Big 12, it's unbeaten BYU. And a group of 5 team from the Mountain West, of course, that is Boise State. And Kev, you can see the projected playoff bracket based on the first week of rankings. BYU is number 9 in the rankings, but because they are the higher-ranked conference champ in front of Boise State, the 5 highest-ranked conference title winners earn that automatic berth to the college football playoff. BYU slots into the 4 seed, which actually moves Ohio State to the 5 seed, and we have focused so much on the teams that will be in the 12-team college football playoff. It's also worth noting how the bracket lays out. One of the things that stood out to me, how vital that number 5 seed might be by the time we get to the college football playoff.
Yeah, a lot of people think it could kind of be that pseudo free pass where you're playing the 12, awesome, then you're playing the 4, who's probably never should actually be ranked 4. Probably by the formats, again, it's not perfect. It's better. It's not perfect. I'll make this point as well. Boise State. Everybody thought, man, we have to get an automatic bid for these G5 teams. Well, no, we don't. No, we don't. We just immediately in our very first unveiling put a G5 team in naturally, right? So, but here's what I think I would have a real problem with, Joe. If BYU, and we're going to break this game down today, is upset by Utah, Boise State's the 4 seed? Come on, that's ridiculous. And that's where we're heading towards, and I don't like that at all.
But they're going back to that game in Eugene against top-ranked Oregon as well, where they went toe-to-toe and lost by 3 as an 18.5-point underdog. So that margin of error, and that's the way it's going to come down to. Margin of victory, margin of defeat during the last 4 weeks of the regular season is going to be critical, Ben.
And that's one of the issues with where the Cougs are. 26 teams around the country have at least 1 win against a team currently ranked in the CFP top 25. Only 7 have multiple wins. BYU has that. The resume is certainly solid for Kalani Sitake ahead of the Holy War on this second Saturday in November against Utah. And yet BYU is at 9. And Kev, to your point, and our final point here before we dive into our CFT game of the week in Baton Rouge between LSU and Alabama, the first rankings do matter because not only do they set the precedent and the principle of what we will see moving forward, also where you are ranked shows you the ground you have to make up or how limited margin you have to fall in those rankings. Now we go to Tiger Stadium next.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
The second Saturday of November, live right here on this Saturday on SportsGrid. It is college football today and a top 15 tilt in Death Valley. It's our college football today game of the week. If you still want, in the 12-team era of the college football playoff, to see regular season matchups that act as a de facto playoff game, an elimination game of sorts, well, welcome to this Saturday inside Tiger Stadium, a significant one between 11th-ranked Alabama in the CFP Top 25 and number 15 LSU. Joe, both of these teams already with 2 losses this year. Again, we had never seen a 2-loss team get to the college football playoff in the 4-team era. We will see multiple teams with multiple losses reach the 12-team field in the college football playoff, and perhaps maybe even, depending on how the rest of the country shakes out, a 3-loss team. But the importance of this game, of course, cannot be magnified enough. And Alabama is a road favorite inside Tiger Stadium under the lights at night. A very difficult place to win.
It is, and you have a contrast in terms of offenses right now. Alabama running the football a little bit better, averaging 177 yards on the ground. LSU throwing for 332 through the air. That's where they have the edge with Garrett Nussmeier at the helm. We saw LSU build a first-half lead against Texas A&M a couple of weeks ago, and all of a sudden in the second half, they changed to Marcel Reed. They could not stop the RPO game. He rushes for 62 yards, 3 touchdowns, makes a couple big plays over the top, and signed, sealed, delivered. Texas A&M wins that matchup. That is going to be the X factor tonight. Can LSU contain the athleticism of Jalen Milroe in terms of the RPO game? If they can, I think they'll be in this matchup. It's an easier said than done, but playing at home, we've seen Alabama struggle. They lost on the road to Vanderbilt, lost on the road to Tennessee. With the extra week of preparation, I'm going to take the points, Kev, with LSU and Brian Kelly.
So this is a really interesting spot for me because I am holding tickets that would suggest I need LSU to win this game. Preseason a 12-1 to win the SEC championship. With some help today, they could have a real clear shot at making that title game, which holding a 12-1, that's all I'm really looking for. I also played Bama at 4-1 to miss the playoff following the Vanderbilt loss. With that said, I'm on Alabama here in this game because that's just where I ended up. You can play the spread math however you want. If you want to just kind of factor in home field advantage, and you could very well say that LSU today's home field advantage is worth more than even a field goal, right? This number, that means the Crimson Tide would be easily laying over a touchdown at home. It might sound lofty, and that is probably one of the ways people will justify getting to LSU. I offer up the other end of it, though. Ole Miss showed up to this building and laid 3.5. Yeah. I still fully believe Alabama is better than Ole Miss. Alabama went to Tennessee and laid 3.5. I believe Tennessee is better than LSU. So we're under a field goal here. I have to play Alabama. And what I am doing, and I will let people know this, due to my other tickets, the LSU one and the Bama missed the playoff, I cannot afford to get middled in this game. I cannot lay 2.5 and Bama win by 1 or 2, and all of the things are going to lose then. So I had to play Bama's money line in this game, which is what I am doing. Kalen DeBoer has been money. He has been absolute money. I mean, check Panther.
I mean, we're trying to get the people fired up.
I was getting a pulse on Baton Rouge.
Yeah, he was.
I was getting a pulse.
They're starting early down there in Baton Rouge today, huh?
It was 7 o'clock in the morning. They got the Tiger on the sidelines.
Kalen DeBoer has been money off of a bye. Brian Kelly is great, home dog, everything.
Yeah.
But I think DeBoer offers as good of a resume as well. With what I've seen from these teams, I got to play the Crimson Tide here.
Both of these teams off a bye. Alabama shut out Missouri at home inside Bryant-Denny. Perhaps their best performance in SEC play. In fact, as 4 favorites in 4 SEC games this year, the only time the Tide has covered the number so far in conference action. LSU, a dismal second half in College Station against Texas A&M, where that Blake Baker-led defense still had some of its woes trying to contain Marcel Reed. LSU has 2 losses, one in the non-conference season opener against USC. Alabama has 2 losses, both coming in conference play. And I do want to highlight, as we see Alabama's team outlook here and where things stand, the Crimson Tide, number 11 in the first CFP rankings, still an odds-on favorite in minus money at minus 140 to reach the college football playoff. How that home field advantage, Joe, does factor in tonight. Since 1960, we've already seen this recipe against Ole Miss earlier in the year. Since 1960, LSU inside Tiger Stadium, after the sun has set, 243, 61, and 4 straight up. That is a win percentage of 79% with Brian Kelly since the start of 2022. At night, home games in Death Valley, a perfect 12-0 straight up as a home underdog 4 times with BK in the last 2.5 years. The Bayou Bengals are 3-1 straight up as an underdog. Joe, we talk a lot about the atmospheres and the pantheons of college football. Tiger Stadium is that, and it's only amplified at night. You mentioned the live Tiger. There will be a live Tiger that is not Mike the Tiger, reportedly, on the sideline today for the Bayou Bengals. If LSU uses that home field advantage, Joe, from a matchup perspective, how do they get the better of the Crimson Tide?
I think it has to be Garrett Nussmeier early with the passing attack. It's going to be a fast track, start fast, and put the pressure on Jalen Milroe. If they allow Jalen Milroe in that rushing attack that pounded the rock for 271 against Missouri and 7.3 yards per rush, going to be a long day for LSU. We've seen LSU sometimes struggle with more physical teams. We saw it early on with Rocket Sanders and Lenora Sellers in South Carolina, Williams-Brice. They were on life support in that game. We saw them struggle against Ole Miss. Ole Miss was able to run the football early on that front seven. They made second-half adjustments. Again, it comes down to Nussmeier. He was very clean with the football in the first half of that game. Yeah. Second half was a complete turnaround, 360. He starts turning the football over. Going to be a long day, but it is the front seven, and it has to be LSU with Lisi and those wide receivers.
I think one of the reasons I'm willing to bet Bama in this game is LSU's inability to play a complete football game.
Yeah.
Even in the victory against Ole Miss, they started out so poorly in that game. They had to get a big comeback. They scored with under 30 seconds remaining to get that game into overtime. Ultimately, I think Bama can jump on them, build a lead, and unlike the Tennessee game, I think they hold serve here on the road.
LSU's only lead in the game against Ole Miss was the game winner in overtime from Garrett Nussmeier to Kyron Lacey. Alabama's defense, much better against Missouri, was not great in the first 4 SEC games for the Crimson Tide. A significant Saturday in the SEC. To the Grove we go next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia and Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
A significant Saturday in the SEC on this second Saturday of November in the final month of the 2024 college football season as we welcome you back to college football today. It's our other top 20 tilt in the Southeastern Conference on this Saturday. Number 3, Georgia in the CFP rankings, taking on Ole Miss, who checks in inside the top 20. Of course, the Runnin' Rebs have 2 losses. Georgia only 1 against Alabama. And speaking of 1, Kev, the line is working down. It was 2.5 in favor of UGA yesterday on this game day Saturday morning, just 1.5. Are you surprised, albeit on the road in the Grove, to see the Bulldogs as only a 1.5 favorite near a pick'em price against the Rebels?
So Lisi was with me on Game Time on Monday night when I saw this line, and I was stopped dead in my tracks and essentially went silent for the final 2 minutes of the show, which isn't the best TV.
You guys are having some issues with sound when you're working.
Yeah, no, it's comparable to playing cop videos in the middle of a breakdown. I could not believe the number. It really threw me for a loop. And now, the more I dive into the game, you see that Ole Miss has been treated with a lot of respect in the market, factor in home field advantage, and okay, fine, let's throw the number out. And let's just take a look at who Ole Miss is, who Ole Miss has been under Lane Kiffin, who Georgia is, who Georgia's been over Kirby Smart, and this is Bulldogs by $1 billion. Right now, everybody is selling Carson Beck, and therefore they're selling the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia still boasts what is comfortably one of the 10 best defenses in college football, most likely higher than that, but we'll call it 10 to keep it easy. Georgia has 1 loss this year. It was at Alabama. They trailed by 21 and took a fourth-quarter lead in the game. Texas, the unstoppable favorites at one point to win a national championship, showed up and found out the SEC ain't sweet and got doubled up in their own building. People still focusing on Beck picks in that game. Okay, Beck then has a nightmare against Florida. Hand up. If Lagway doesn't get injured, Daters might have actually pulled off the upset. But he did. Beck found his rhythm. Georgia's defense went bully mode. They won the game by 14. Here's, I think, the simple story on Georgia. If Carson Beck, who is a pedigree quarterback who's been playing at the level for too long, finds his level, Georgia rolls. He is now averaging 1.6 yards per pass attempt less year over year. Completion percentage has dropped 7%. He's nearly doubled his interceptions from last year to this year. I don't think that continues. Maybe you do. I don't. Carson Beck, to me, is too good. Which means when Beck finds his level, Georgia's right back to being what they always are, the very best team in college football. And Ole Miss has never, ever shown the ability to hang, much less beat those teams. I can only love Georgia in this game, Joe.
Yeah, I like Georgia. I don't love them. And there's a lot of factors not to love Georgia this year. And you bring up Beck, right, in regards to his productivity and lack of turning the football over. Back-to-back games, 6 interceptions. But you look at Georgia from an offensive perspective. Last year, 50% third down conversions. This year, 38% third down conversions. The tight end type of productivity with Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp, 21 receptions this year. Very mediocre. Why is that important? Well, Brock Bowers led the team with receptions last year. There is no security blanket. And possibly when you look at Ole Miss's offense, averaging 377 passing yards per game, they have the more consistent quarterback coming and heading into this matchup with Jackson Dart. 71%, 21 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And oh, by the way, one of the best rush defenses in all of college football, holding opposing offenses to 82 rushing yards per game, 29% third down conversions. Kev, I agree with everything you said, and I like Georgia, but this is a no play for me simply because again, I do have concerns about Carson Beck. I want to see this first quarter play out. I might jump in from an in-game perspective, but as a Bulldog fan and a backer, I'd be very hesitant because of this line.
Ole Miss is the 4th best scoring offense in the country, averaging 42.1 points per game. They are also one of 7 teams allowing less than 2 touchdowns on the other side, 13.2. The Running Rebs defensively has been a huge story of the success the last 2 years in Oxford. 22 games since the start of last season, 14 of the 22 staying under. We'll talk quarterback comparison a little bit later on between these two. But Carson Beck and Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart last week, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns, as many touchdowns as incompletions in that matchup for the Runnin' Rebs. We'll continue to break this all down as we fire around here on College Football Today. I believe we're coming up on the break, right?
Yeah, we absolutely are.
Certainly are. All right, we're coming up on the break here on College Football Today. There's plenty more on the other side here on SportsGrid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take. I think this line is asking you once again to take the room.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia and Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His 3rd 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to College Football Today, live right here on this second Saturday in November. It's week number 11 on SportsGrid. Joe Lisi, Kevin Walsh, and Ben Stevens. If you had, at this point of the season, following the initial unveiling of the college football playoff rankings, Colorado at number 20, and the Buffs with a legitimate chance to win the Big 12 championship, congrats to you, because that's exactly what we see entering weekend number 11. Colorado is a 4.5-point road favorite now on the road in Lubbock against the upset-minded Texas Tech Red Raiders, who pulled off the upset over previously undefeated Iowa State last week in Ames. 4.5-point number now, Joe. Lofty total at 62.5. Listen, we know you like to go bing, bing, bing with Joey McGuire and that program in Lubbock, but when you break down this matchup, who do you think has the edge?
I'll give the edge to Texas Tech because they're playing at home and because I believe they have the more consistent rushing attack with Taj Brooks averaging 165 yards on the ground. Taj Brooks, 8 straight this year in terms of 100-yard performances. He's been over his total in 6 of 8 games. His number today is 124.5. We know about how the weakness was over the past couple of seasons of Colorado, giving up $155 on the ground. Much better than they were last year, right? But they still can't run the football consistently, 80 yards per game, and that offensive line is still a little bit of a suspect and concern. That's why I'll give the edge to Joey McGuire and Texas Tech. We've seen the line go from 3.5 to 4.5. Right. I'll take the extra point. But I'll just say this. So we talk about Colorado. They did what they had to do. Become bowl eligible. There's progression. Now you have your eye on the Big 12 championship. Once you get that, then you can worry about the college football playoff. Everything is in front of him. He's done a fantastic job. 3-1 on the road, and they've won those games, Kev, by an average margin of 24.3 points per game. I can't wait to see how this plays out, but give me the Red Raiders.
I'm very excited to watch the game. I demand, though, all breakdowns cease and we just shower this team in praise. Because people, I don't care, people circle this program ready to attack them and tear them down. Yes, I know that ESPN throws them in prime time every time, and Mark Jones goes wilder. Yeah, guess what? Mark Jones crushes those games, quite frankly, all right? And the Kings miss him when he's not there, breaking down DeMar DeRozan, giving people buckets, okay? I understand that. But everybody else is, this team's not good. They lost to Nebraska. They're not good. I'll bet any amount of money people think they're good. First of all, nobody thought they were good. The win total was barely bowl eligible, and here they already are. And you could sit and talk about the Big 12 shortcomings, to which there are many. Oklahoma State, embarrassing. Gundy, again, should be on the hottest seat in the country, yet somehow might stay there for another decade. Utah, a mess. Yep. Kansas, all of these expectations. They have 2 wins. But that then means that for Colorado, we cannot poke at the schedule. No, they kept their heads above water. They have continuously found a way, and they've found a way doing it in ways that we didn't think would be possible. Yes, Joe, the Texas Tech rush attack is 10 times better because Taj Brooks is a star. Colorado has a rush attack this year? Since when? Colorado's defense is arguably better than their offense. What? How's it possible? How in the world is that possible? Their remaining 4 games, they will be booked as a favorite. In all 4 of them, I don't know if they're going to win all 4 of them. If Deion wins 10 games, he might leave at the end of the year. They should still build a statue in Boulder and want a Shadur next to him and Travis Hunter on the other side. This is outrageous. Colorado, the Buffs, we only talked about them because Deion was here. Joe, they're 20th in the CFP's initial rankings. That's how good of a job he's done.
No, he's done a great job. And we said, what was the mindset of Deion Sanders, right? Yeah, you have 4 wins last year. Did you want to stay with the program? If you wanted to stay with the program, big picture, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, you had to become bowl eligible and show progression. He's absolutely done that. He's brought talent in, Travis Hunter, Shadur. Now, they're going to be out the door. But they get to 10 wins. You set the foundation moving forward. Your first year in the Big 12 after leaving, this is a dynamic performance for them.
He might win National Coach of the Year. I mean, it's probably Cignetti and that war machine, but Deion's right there.
As he should. He got them to bowl eligible in a full season for the first time in a very long time in Boulder, Colorado. It should be noted, as we showed those odds, plus 270 for the Buffaloes to win the Big 12, now tied for the second best price. Incredible. Alongside Iowa State, only 60 cents behind the conference favorites in the unbeaten BYU Cougs. And you mentioned their remaining schedule. After today, in what appears to be a tough and trappy spot in Lubbock, Utah, who stinks despite being the preseason favorite, already eliminated from Big 12 title game contention, on the road against Kansas, who is a 2-win football team, and the only other team that has already been eliminated from Big 12 title contention, the team that played in the conference championship game last year, that is Oklahoma State. We will wonder about this season for the Pokes for a long time. He mentioned the statues that might be built outside of Folsom Field. Dion, his son Shador, and his other son, Travis Hunter. Well, Travis might be striking a pose in that statue, or at least in the second weekend of December. Travis Hunter enters week number 11 as the Heisman Trophy favorite. Travis Hunter, who averages 130 snaps played per game. And Kev, we've seen guys play on both sides of the ball. We've seen receivers who are also great kick and punt returners. We have never seen somebody this elite at both of the positions they play. Travis Hunter, 757 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. In the game that he has been fully healthy, 6 of them, he has had at least 89 receiving yards. And on defense, he has 2 interceptions and 7 passes defended. That is the most of any defensive back in the Big 12. It is why, in my opinion, he is the rightful Heisman Trophy favorite entering Week 11. Now a co-favorite as you see the market shifting with Miami's Cam Ward. But Kev, when all is said and done, will Hunter do enough to have Travis in New York striking the pose?
I mean, the Heisman part of it to me is still a little mind-blowing because he basically missed 2 games. And now, he did play in both games. So the GP number is going to look fine. And due to his preposterous snap rate, he'll still play more than maybe anybody in college football. But it is surprising to me that didn't shift him down. And if it was Hunter against Gabriel, Joe, it would make all the sense in the world to me because Gabriel's whole argument is Oregon is number 1 and unbeaten. I'm saying that as somebody with Gabriel tickets. Cam Ward has been as important to Miami, if not more, than Travis Hunter has actually been to Colorado, and he's not missed a darn thing, and they are unbeaten. Top 5 in the country. So I am still surprised that Hunter is neck and neck with Cam Ward.
Yeah, I think it's Cam Ward right now, assuming that Miami's undefeated, because without Cam Ward, you can make the argument they could have lost 2 or 3 games, right? California, Virginia Tech, I mean, you name it. Look at the Duke game, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. The ability to just pull away and put his team in a position to score points. Louisville was another game without Cam Ward. They wouldn't have won, in my opinion. So he is the most valuable player to that team. But so is Travis Hunter from an offense and defensive perspective. And obviously the defensive stats go unnoticed or I don't want to say unnoticed, but they're not as, flamboyant as the offensive stats. Right. But if he can get this team to 10-2 and they're there potentially fighting with BYU or whoever, Iowa State or whoever's in the college, the Big 12 championship for a potential college football playoff berth, it's going to come down to splitting hairs. Who's more valuable, Travis Hunter or Cam Ward? I would take a shot on Hunter.
The remaining schedule, by the way, for the Cyclones and the Cougars, the 2 teams in front or with Colorado in the Big 12 title race, also have more difficult schedules to end out this year than the Buffs. Kev, quickly back to you. Let's highlight Texas Tech for just a moment. Perfect 3-0 against the number as an underdog this year. 2 outright victories, including last week against Iowa State. In fact, with Joey McGuire, 9-5 ATS as an underdog. But where they struggle is defending the pass. So enter Shador Sanders in a 324.5-yard passing prop.
Yeah, I mean, if Shador throws for 400, it wouldn't even be surprising with the amount that Tech allows and the amount that he may need to throw in this game. It's hard to bet Shador to throw for 325 and not just bet Travis, though, then to get 100 yards, which is why that Heisman number will continue on the move. I will let people know. We'll break it down more. I'm on Colorado first quarter money line off the bye.
We will have best bets for these big games, and that includes in Bloomington. Coming your way next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take the room.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia and Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Where were you the last time that Indiana started a football season 9-0? Here is the answer. You were nowhere, because it's never happened. For the first time in 137 seasons of this Hoosiers football program in Bloomington, Curt Cignetti has led Indiana to a perfect 9-0 start. Indiana, one of 5 remaining undefeated teams at the FBS level around the country. And not only is Indiana 9-0, they have won all 9 games by at least 2 touchdowns and are covering in 8 of the 9. And Joe Lisi, for the first time since 1968, when you were just a young pup, Indiana is favored to beat Michigan in a football game. That was unkind of me, but we have to have a little fun. Not only is Indiana favored to beat Michigan for the first time since 1968, it's not just a point or a field goal or even a touchdown. It is a 14.5-point spread in favor of the Hoosiers. Joe, will it be a comfortable ride for Indiana today against the reigning national champs?
I don't think so. This could be a smash play for me in terms of Michigan. I really like
Michigan?
Oh, yeah, Michigan.
Just Michigan.
Well,
not
me. Sure, and we're not to that point.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Right,
let me just say this. All the credit to Curt Cignetti for blowing through the 5.5 win total, for making them one of the Cinderella teams of this year. There's a few of them and BYU, respectively. They're doing it from an offensive perspective. What a transition for Curtis Rourke, coming from Ohio, to do a fantastic job. One of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, back-to-back games, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. You look at Indiana, they're averaging 284 through the air, another $170 on the ground, physical in terms of run support. But the series, when you just look at teams having the upper hand over a certain program, and I know every year is different, but the numbers suggest Michigan will be in this game for the 14 points. You look at it. They have won 27 of the last 28 meetings in the series. Last time that Indiana won outright was 2020 with Michael Penix. That was also the year that Indiana knocked off Penn State and in Michigan in the same respective years. It's going to be difficult for me. I think Michigan could shorten the game, run the football with the danger man, Donovan Edwards and Mullings. I think somehow, some way they're in the number. But all the testament to Curt Cignetti, they've done a fantastic job.
Indiana is an anomaly. We saw TCU a few years ago, right? People didn't really believe, and then they'd win the game, but you go, I'm telling you, it's not real, and it never came true. They lost that Big 12 title game,
right?
But then obviously the national championship game was a mess. The comparisons to TCU are for BYU, not Indiana. They are a death machine, war machine, super laser. I don't come up with just crazy things. That's what they are. I actually think Michigan could win this game, and I'm so scared of Indiana, I'm not taking 14.5 points. That's how scary they are. I've tried. I had a buddy who usually will text me for my picks on a Saturday, and I sent him my card, and he goes, I like everything but your Michigan State plus 8 bet, right, we were getting. He goes, should we take Indiana? And I was like, are you an idiot? Like, did you just ask me for my picks and ask me to, like, what is wrong with you, right? They were up 10-0 Michigan State, and I was going to text him. I was like, I'll leave it alone. Like, who cares? And then ended up getting texts from him saying, I told you about Indiana, who went on a 47-0 run. They're not squeaking games out.
No.
They're slaughtering everyone. And one of the reasons Indiana's a little bit more believable is Curtis Rourke, who has played really good football in his college career, but not at this level. And sometimes we don't think that those guys are going to progress. I'll make a wild comp for people. Dalton Connect is what Curtis Rourke reminds me of, where Dalton Connect was not supposed to show up to the SEC last year and be one of the 5 best players in college hoops. But guess what? He was, because he was really good when he was playing. You have to remind me of where he played before he
Northern Colorado.
There you go. He was awesome, and it just translated. For Curtis Rourke, it's translated. And Signetti's a monster. I'm playing Davis Warren passing because that, to me, is the safest angle somehow in this game, and I don't know how that's possible. Indiana right now, I said this the other day, and I meant it. If you vote them one in the AP poll, I don't have a single problem with it. I really don't.
And that's a really good point, Kev, because Indiana has won all 9 games by at least 2 touchdowns. Again, we use odds to drive our conversations. Indiana is laying 2 touchdowns against the reigning national title winners today. Indiana's cover margin, right? So on the expected outcome, Indiana laying a touchdown. Indiana laying 21 in non-conference action against Charlotte. Indiana's cover margin is 17.2 points per game. They are over-exceeding even the highest odds makers' expectations to a point you must bet on them. However, it is Michigan, right? And there is still that brand bias that enters today. There is also what Michigan can do as an underdog to shorten the game. It's a 14.5-point spread. You're not predicting Indiana to win by a field goal. It's over 2 touchdowns. Michigan has been an underdog 4 times this year. They are just 1-3, both straight up and against the number. That outright win and cover at home against USC. And Lisi, here's why I actually think the game goes today. In 6 of the 7 games for the Maize and Blue against Power 4 competition, it's gone over. And they've allowed at least 24 points in all 4 games booked as an underdog this year. And now you have an Indiana team that is the 3rd best scoring offense in the country, the 8th best total offense in the country, and Curtis Rourke, who in every Big Ten game that Indiana has started with him under center, they have scored at least 42 points. And Joe, in the 4 fully healthy games he has completed, he has thrown at least 3 touchdown passes. I think Indiana is the right side, and I think the offense will show that today. But you favor Michigan. What will the defense need to do against this Hoosiers offense that looks like a wagon right now?
Forced turnovers. They're -5 in turnover margin, and Indiana's +10 in turnover margin. So just think about that. You win the turnover battle, you run the football effectively, and convert on 3rd down. That will benefit Michigan's offense. They can't go toe-to-toe. They blow through this number from an over perspective. They're going to get blown out just the way Washington and Nebraska did. It's lights out. But if they can run the football, score first, win the turnover battle, that'll put the pressure on Rourke. Keep in mind, I mean, they held Michigan State -36 rushing.
Crazy.
And now sacks are a part of that, but still, -36 rushing last week.
Indiana is the best rushing defense in the country, only allowing a little bit more than 62 yards per game, baked in with the stats last week against Michigan State. The game of the week last week was Penn State and Ohio State. Didn't go well for the Nittany Lions. How do they respond? Next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Wrapping up this opening hour of college football today, how does Penn State respond in this matchup back at home inside Beaver Stadium after coming up short once again in a marquee matchup against Ohio State? The odds makers expected to be easy today, Kev, for the Nittany Lions, laying near 2 touchdowns at home against Washington. Penn State expected to win a game? Good. The Nittany Lions not expected as the underdog to win a game? Not so good, but here they're a double-digit favorite. How does Penn State bounce back against the Huskies?
So I think they will bounce back well. I initially went into this game thinking I was going to grab some Washington. You look at Franklin, last year 0-2 against the number following the Michigan-Ohio State games, but year before that a dominant 2-0. I didn't see enough there to tell me that this was a fade spot. You know, kind of looking at the number, I didn't think it was all too terrible. If it was 14.5, maybe that's a little bit different. Then I said, you know what? This total looks a little bit light. Maybe a Penn State team's all right. I lost a little bit of confidence there. Maybe I'm a little shaken to my core. I was very proud that I had won every bet placed in a Penn State game this season until last week's debacle. They didn't take it hard. I did as well. The more I look into this, though, we have ourselves a sneaky buy low spot on Nick Singleton. You know, Les, you and I have talked a lot about the Katron Allen, Nick Singleton backfield, and usually you'll find one of Ben or I saying, Katron, too low. He and Singleton are one and the same. Well, it's flipped. Singleton is now around 15 yards, nearly shorter than Katron Allen in the market. At even money, you can get Nick Singleton for 60-plus rushing yards against one of the very worst rush defenses in the Big Ten. UW is allowing 186.4 yards per game on the ground in their last 5. Singleton came out of the gates red hot. First 4 games, 102 yards per game rushing. I think he can bounce back here against, again, a terrible rush defense where I'm expecting Penn State to lead and a little bit higher scoring affair, Joe.
Yeah, I'm seeing it a little differently, but you bring up great points, and that's been the dominance for Penn State. I mean, every year it's the rushing attack. This year they are averaging 187 yards on the ground. The problem that I keep going back to is twofold. One, over the last 4 weeks, the rushing attack has only averaged 124 yards per game. They couldn't get it going against a more physical defense in Ohio State. That's understood, but just the inconsistency. And I keep going back to this, Ben. Again, I know it was Ohio State, but Drew Aller, so inconsistent. A lot of pressure now on this team. Oh, the big game is out of the way. We're just going to, go through the motions. It's a whiteout now. It's Washington. We'll just smash them and be right there. That is the concern. I feel like Jed Fish and Will Rogers and this team coming off the win to USC, maybe they're playing with a little bit of house money. I mean, he did throw for 262 yards. They score first. they could be, I don't know if they win, but I'm inclined to take the 12.5. Look at the total, too. 45.5. I mean, we're suggesting a lower scoring game and Washington to be within number. I'll take the points in this matchup.
So a couple of points that you laid out right there. This is whiteout game number 16 ever in the history of State College. And we can see how it impacts the college football playoff odds for the Penn Staters as well. We'll get to that conversation in just a moment. But when you look at Penn State in whiteout games, 9-6 straight up in the previous 15. Since the start of 2022, Penn State has lost now 6 games. 5 of them now against Ohio State and Michigan, and then in the bowl game against Ole Miss in a New Year's Six Bowl last December. That was the only time since the beginning of the 2022 college football campaign that Penn State was booked as a favorite and lost the game outright. They are 28-1 straight up as a favorite. They are 28-1 against the number. As an underdog, they're 0-5. All 5 losses again against the Maize and Blue and the Buckeyes. Washington away from Husky Stadium, and that includes the Apple Cup in Seattle, played at the home of the Seahawks at Lumen Field. 0-4 straight up and against the number. A dog in 2 of them, both on the road in Big Ten play against Iowa and Indiana, and they lost both of those games by 2 touchdowns. And again, Kev, you made this point. Entering not last week in the top 5 tilt against Ohio State, but the game the week prior in Madison against Wisconsin. That game was more crucial for Penn State's season outlook than even the Buckeyes because they were expected to lose to Ohio State. And even if they did lose to Ohio State, as you can see, a 1-loss Penn State team favored in their Final Four is a minus 350 favorite to reach the college football playoff.
Yeah, which, again, it's a tough situation, man. I actually went through, kind of my own rankings. I do not think that Penn State is a team that is not college football playoff caliber. They are damn sure not 6th in the country caliber, though, and I think it is a real shame. Their best win is USC, which then puts people in a position to say nice things about Lincoln Riley's group this year. I mean, that's a tough sacrifice even for me to make.
Hey, listen, it is a very difficult pill to swallow. Hour number 2 starts with Ben's Top 10 next.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take. I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His 3rd 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.